Good morning. Here are your top stories for February 8th, 2026. We begin in Japan, where voters are heading to the polls today for a snap general election, and this one could really shake up the country's political landscape.
So this election was called by Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. Now, she only took office back in late 2025, so this is a pretty big gamble on her part. She's hoping to cash in on her strong personal approval ratings to lock in a solid mandate for her government's agenda.
To give you some context, things were really tight before this election was called. You're looking at a House of Representatives with 465 seats, which means you need 233 to get that magic majority. Prime Minister Takaichi's ruling coalition, that's the LDP and the Ishin Party, well, they were sitting at 232 seats, just one single seat shy of an outright majority. And it looks like that gamble might just pay off. All the pre-election polls suggest the LDP-Ishin coalition isn't just on track to secure a majority. They're poised to expand it significantly. But there's a catch. Record snowfall up in some of the northern regions could keep people from getting to the polls, and that low turnout, well, it could throw a wrench in the works and make the final results a little unpredictable. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about the economy. We're seeing this really interesting split-screen situation. On one hand, the stock market is hitting some absolutely historic highs. But on the other, the job market is telling a very, very different story for a lot of American workers.
Get this. On Friday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed above 50,000 for the first time ever. I mean, that's a huge milestone. We're talking about an index that tracks 30 of the biggest companies in the US, and it just smashed a massive psychological barrier.
And this wasn't just a slow crawl over the finish line. The record was set thanks to a massive single-day surge of over 1,200 points. The driving force behind all this, you guessed it, AI. Chipmakers and other tech stocks were just on fire, fueled by this huge wave of investor optimism about what artificial intelligence is going to do for the economy. But like I said, that's only one side of the story. That number you see there, 1.17 million plus, that's how many U.S. workers have been laid off just since the beginning of 2025. It's a stark contrast, and it paints a much tougher economic picture for a whole lot of people. And these layoffs are happening across the board. We're talking tech, logistics, retail, you name it. And what's really fascinating and maybe a little ironic is the reason a lot of these companies are giving for the cuts. They're talking about restructuring and a big strategic shift toward AI and automation. Yep, the very same thing that's sending the stock market through the roof. We're going to keep tracking these developing stories for sure. So for continued updates, please do go ahead and like and subscribe. These contrasting economic signals are creating a lot of uncertainty, and that uncertainty is being mirrored by some major developments taking place on the world stage. So let's dive into that. We're seeing some significant new diplomatic moves when it comes to two of the world's most critical and ongoing conflicts. First up, you might remember the charter for the new Board of Peace being signed recently in Davos. Well, now the White House has announced that the very first meeting of that board is set for February 19th. And it's going to be held in Washington. So what's on the agenda? According to officials, the immediate goal is to get world leaders in a room to coordinate fundraising for the reconstruction of Gaza. At the same time, they'll be hammering out the next steps of a U.S.-led plan for the territory's future. Things like governance and security. Meanwhile, there's a big development in the war in Ukraine. Reports, which have now been confirmed by President Zelensky's office, say the United States has put a deadline on the table. They've apparently told Kyiv they have until June 2026 to reach a peace agreement with Russia. That obviously adds a whole new layer of pressure and a very clear timeline to diplomatic efforts. All right, and to wrap things up, let's end on a different note. We're heading to the world of sports because the 2026 Winter Olympics are officially underway in Italy, hosted by Milan and Cortina. The games kicked off back on February 6th with a huge opening ceremony. You had the traditional parade of athletes, of course, 92 different national committees were represented, and the whole thing was just this spectacular showcase of Italian culture to get the competition started. Now, there was one moment during the ceremony that got people talking. There were reports that the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife got something of a mixed reception, including some pretty audible boos from parts of the crowd there in the San Siro Stadium. But once the competition got going, the host nation had a huge reason to celebrate. On the very first full day, Italy secured its first gold medal of the Games. And what a story it was. The gold came from speed skater Francesca Lollobrigida in the women's 3,000-meter event.
And she didn't just win, she set a new Olympic record while doing it. And here's the best part. She pulled off this incredible victory on her 35th birthday. You just can't write it any better than that.
And that's the news for now. This has been your update, and we will have another one for you in 24 hours.